You've tuned in to the most crazy rocking metal podcast on the air. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Metal from the Inside.
I want to kind of get right into it because,
Sure,
I've had David on the podcast way back in June of last year already, which is so unbelievable to me that it's been almost a year. But I've never had Jeff on the podcast or spoken to him, so it's nice to have you on as well. And when I heard that this collaboration was happening, it was really cool to hear because I know that you both have been doing a lot. David, you've been working on Ellefson and the No Cover record, and I know you've been working with Wet, Jeff, and all that stuff, and Sons of Apollo. So I guess I'll start with you, Jeff, kind of just about how this collaboration happened, because it was unexpected, but unexpected in the best way. So maybe you could let us into kind of how this ended up coming to be.
Well, David and I have clearly known each other. We're more acquaintances from the past. You know, we basically met through our other buddy, Al Petrelli, who's a musical director at Trans-Siberian Orchestra. And David would come to the shows every year. When we play in Arizona, he would come see us and come visit Al. And that's pretty much the extent of how much I knew David. Of course, we knew of each other from our different circumstances and careers through life. But it was just basically that was the initial meeting. And we always kind of had that natural kinship with each other. It's just, I knew just from talking to him, he's the kind of guy I would hang out with, the kind of guy I would be friends with, and possibly a musical connection. We didn't realize that until David called me last year and said, listen, I got this song. I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but I don't remember if that was the circumstance, but basically he hired me to sing on it. He threw me a couple bucks, said, if you could just knock this one out, when you have a minute. And I did it right away. And I think that also kind of, he remembered how focused and how he gave it to me and I gave it to him back right away. It wasn't one of these things where we work with many musicians and it could be 2 months later. It's like, hey, you think you can get on that thing I sent you? And we both kind of share the same work ethic. It was almost like the connection was immediately there. So you fast forward to another project we were potentially thinking of working on together. That kind of went to the side a little bit, but again, we connected on the work ethic side of things. David called me again and said, I got these tunes. I don't know what I'll use them for, whatever. And they just started building from there. From not realizing or thinking about what we might do with them, we decided, why don't we do something with them? And all of a sudden there was a buzz created between the fact that we're working together. Industry people that we know very well they knew that we were doing this together. They wanted to hear it. And all of a sudden the buzz grew and grew and grew. And that was the how we initially put out the Riot cover of Swords and Tequila. We wanted to actually capitalize on the fact that we're doing something together, but let's not give them what we're actually doing just yet. Let's kind of tease them with something that they're familiar with, our own rendition of something that's kind of a classic between the two of us, in our lives and careers. And it's snowballing from there. We had the longest talk yesterday, just kind of catching up on everything. And it's amazing how neither of us expected this to actually snowball the way it's been going.
Yeah. And what was the decision to cover Swords and Tequila? Because I know it's one of those songs that, I know it very well, kind of the diehard hard rock fans, really, really know that album, right. The worst album cover ever, but one of the greatest records, one of the greatest, most underrated records. So, what was the decision in covering that song specifically?
Well, it's exactly that. It's a classic song, it's a classic album. And it started with David. We weren't really looking to cover or make covers. He's already done a covers album, but it's almost like, I wonder what that would sound like if we would take something that meant so much to us in our growing years and, our early years of what we were doing and do our rendition of it, but kind of try to stay as true to the original, because you change it too much and people just start bitching about it. It's like, oh, why'd you leave well enough alone? But I think our rendition was a really cool updated version while staying within the classic form of what that song stood for.
And David, I know that you've, like we kind of just mentioned, you've been doing the kind of the cover stuff. And I know right now you're working on Megadeth, so you're working on original stuff. But for you, is this kind of cool to, you did the covers album, you got to work on this cover. Is it sometimes nice to take a break from sometimes the original stuff and just play a song that you enjoy that was kind of from your youth and getting into this music?
Totally. Well, first of all, you may be a recent college grad, but you are truly an old soul if you know that Riot album and how horrible the cover is and everything about it. It's like, wow, that was a quick deep dive right there. I'm impressed.
We're both impressed.
You definitely got your heavy metal cred going right there. So, but you know, it is funny. It's you know, these, like, it's Jeff and I were talking last night. You know, I wake up in the morning and just say a little prayer, kind of lead me where you need me, boss, you know, kind of thing. And some days riffs and melodies just fall out of the sky, like literally, you know what I mean? You pick up your guitar, or you get on the phone, or and just an inspiration hits, you know. And Swords and Tequila was one of them. You know, look, there's a ton of these kind of Zoom, Foursquare, you know, collaborative jams from this last year, because it's a way that we've been able to stay connected with each other and create and do some covers and things. I've only done really one of those that I did with Phil Demmel and Styx from Steel Panther and Russell Allen, and we did a Dokken cover, and that was Phil just called me and said, "Hey, you want to play bass?" And I said, "Sure." And that's the only one that I've done. You know, Jeff and I think, are more of the mindset of, if we can record master recordings, is kind of the, you know, it's the world we grew up in, making records, you know. And you know, and speaking to our friendship, you know, it's funny, my son Roman, you know, who's now 25, you know, I remember a couple years ago, we were driving down the streets going somewhere, and he was like, "Dad, listen to this Rising Force album," and you know, and he was really into it, and singing Jeff's praises, you know. And I said, "Well, we should go out and, you know, see TSO, and you can meet Jeff," and you know what I mean. So it's funny, my son became Jeff's biggest fan in my house, you know, because again, you know, an old soul himself, you know, doing music deep dives, you know, and so it's funny how these things come around. But I think both of us are working on a lot of stuff behind the scenes all the time. And, you know, it's kind of like, it's like fishing. You just throw lines in the water, you know, and some days they bite, some days they don't, you know, and some days the one line you weren't even thinking was going to bite suddenly starts, you know, there's a frickin' big old tuna hanging off the bottom, and you're like, well, reel that one in, you know. And that's kind of how this thing with music is these days, because, you know, Jeff's got TSO, I've got Megadeth, you know, we've got these big operations that we're part of. But in between, there's a lot of other time to create, and, or, you know, kind of where we started our conversation today, that, you know, the COVID thing unknowingly, you know, put this big immediate time out on all of us and a big pause on all of our plans. And suddenly we all kind of found ourselves connecting to people that, had we not stopped for a minute and just stayed stopped, and the world stopping around us, we probably would have not made these connections. And you're right, you know, my Ellefson-No cover record was one of those. We were thinking about doing an original album, and we pivoted quickly and did covers. And those covers are all songs I grew up with. I mean, BTO and Sweet, and, you know, these old things from back in the, and I grew up in the 70s. That was when I was a kid, is when I first got into music and started hearing that, you know. And then the 80s were kind of both me and Jeff, it was sort of our turn up to bat to, you know, all right, kids, step up, show us what you got, you know. And then, you know, that's what, you know, kind of got our careers going. And, you know, so it's interesting all these years later that we're able to, you know, find these collaborations. I think we're in an interesting season for guys like Jeff and I, where you can tell there's a lot left in the tank. You know, I hit my friend KK Downing last year. I was going over to do some dates, and I wanted to do a book signing, and I hit him up and said, "Hey, can I do a book signing at your venue?" And I said, "Hey, you want to do a jam? You want to do something?" You know, it's kind of, and we were sitting next to each other at the same, doing like a signing for some fans. And he goes, "All right, David, I think you always knew there's a little more left in the tank for me," you know. And I love KK. He's just one of the good guys, you know. And you know, despite his huge career in Judas Priest, you're a freaking guitar player till the day you leave the planet. You know, Jeff's a singer, I'm a bass player. We're all songwriters, and, you know, and I think now finding this sort of kinship, you know, like this, to just make music, and especially when it turns out to be really good. And it's, you know, the worst thing to do is put a bunch of famous guys in a room and then try to make something, because I've been,
or expect something to happen.
Something. Yeah. And this thing, like what we did, where, you know, Jeff and I, the people we work with, we've all grown up together. You know, we were all famous people are all people who were once not famous, you know, and then did something and became famous. And we're lucky enough that that's what we've done. And I think probably the thing we enjoy about that is that we've got similar experiences, you know, and, you know, when I send Jeff something or he sends me something, we can go back and forth on tweaking things, and we don't take things personally, and we can rise to the occasion. And sometimes we don't have to say it to each other. We just know. We hear it back, go, yeah, you know what, I need to fix that. And that's another level of sort of intuition where it's like, I can't believe that fucking guy came back to me and had me change this part. You know what I mean? Like, you know, look, we've all got egos. We all get married to our creative, you know, creations, you know, but it's, you know, there's just these really fun moments. And certainly this excuse me, what Jeff and I are doing is one of them where, we just kind of let the thing happen. And it's, you know, I always say at this age in my life, I want to make music I like with friends I like, you know, and that's kind of the long and the short of it for me.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I mean, at this point in both of your careers, I mean, you've built both of your careers up high. You know, you don't really owe anybody anything when it comes to music specifically. But, you know, yeah, you're at the stage in your career now where you can pick who you want to play with. You can pick the kind of music that you want to do. You're not trying to please a record company all the time per se, you know, and that must be kind of liberating in a way.
I think David is part of a musical history. You know, Megadeth is an iconic sound and genre. And of course, you know, he's part of that mold of that legacy. But there are other avenues that he might want to explore musically that don't fit with Megadeth. And I'm the same. I've always been one of those. And it's been a curse and a blessing at the same time, because it's hard for me to hone into one band and one group of musicians that I can feel complete with, which is why I'm kind of stepping to the different sidelines and putting different things together. I just want to feel completed as a musician, as a creative outlet. And something like this gives us both the chance to do something we normally wouldn't do with our day job, so to speak. And it's especially now, we keep bringing it up, the fact that where we are in our careers and our lives at our age, whatever you want to call it, we can explore these things without damaging what we've already created. We've already created the legacy of where our careers sit and where our voices, where our, whatever you want to call it. But now we can take something and do something on the side that we love and believe in. And it works just as well for us. Even if two people buy it, we love the creative outlet that we'd be able to create together.
Right. And I want to talk a little bit too about getting Rick Hughes in this as well, which of course, you know, from Sword, which was also really cool to see. And I know that you kind of, David, were influenced by Sword and kind of, you know, had a friendship and relationship with Rick kind of before this. So talk a little bit about getting him involved in this project and, you know, just bringing him on board.
I think it was our friend Mitch Lafon up in Canada, who's got a successful podcast and a journalist. He actually, I think, introduced Rick and Sword over to me and a record company that I have called with Combat Records, and we put out an album that they did. It was a master of. They were on tour with Motorhead, and it was ironically at Hammersmith Odeon in London. And this was from I think 1986 or so. They had an album out called Metalized, which, you know, to those of us who were, you know, who are fans of Sword, that's their record, you know, that's their Master of Puppets, their, you know, their Rust in Peace, whatever. That's their big record. And back when we were on the Peace Sells tour, we had a Canadian sound man from Montreal, and he's the one who introduced us initially to that record, and we used to drive around and listen to it. They had a great song called Stoned Again, which was very appropriate for those long drives in the motorhome on the Peace Sells tour. And so we, you know, always loved the band. And so when Mitch introduced us, we put this record out, and it just kind of hit. Me and our guitar player, Andy Martingelli, were just chatting one day on text, and the idea came, it's like, you know, let's have him, you know, throw a vocal on this, just because again, it's a cover, and like Jeff said, we're kind of tipping our hand that, hey, me and Jeff are doing some other stuff, but this is kind of a one-off of this thing right here. So, you know, as a sort of just kind of introduction to what we're doing. And being a cover song, it was kind of like, yeah, let's call all of our friends. Come one, come all. Let's have a big rock and roll party here, you know? So having Rick on it, Rick and Jeff have two different sounding voices, which is, I think, great when you do collaborations like that. Unfortunately, as a bass player, you usually don't get to call your friends and have 3 bass players on a track. The instrument I chose, or I should say chose me, you know, it's usually that. Singers, guitar players, they get to have all their friends involved, you know. But yeah, it made for a lot of fun. Ironically, his band is Sword. The song is Swords and Tequila. That was just kind of an extra little, you know, pun play on words there with that. But yeah, Rick he's a lovely guy. He's a wonderful man. And Sword is back out playing and performing. And, you know, so to just invite him to the party, he's such a gracious guy. He texts me every week. Oh my God, I can't believe, thank you for being, you know, I'm just so happy to be part of this. And so he's just and he's a great singer, and he's become a good friend now. So it's, you know, again, just another music we like with friends we like, you know.
Hey, David, on that last note that you brought up about you can't invite 3 other bass players, I'm going to suggest that we do a cover of Spinal Tap's Big Bottom. if I don't know if you're familiar, Sydney, if you're familiar with the song or the movie.
I am.
I'm sure she is. Yeah.
The only instruments are like tom toms and
right.
Bass solo, bass everything. Yeah.
So, exactly. Or we write our own, you know. Yeah. Bigger bottom, you know.
That's so funny. Yeah. Oh man, just 3 bass players on. I mean, you can do it. Nobody can tell you can't, right?
Hey, we're gonna bring 4 in. That way, it truly is a bigger bottom.
We're gonna one up them.
One louder than them. One more bass.
Yeah, but I mean, for Jeff, it must be cool to get to collaborate with, you know, singers like that, which I mean, I know that you get to do that on, you know, when you're with TSO and all that, but it must be fun, you know, to, you know, collaborate with somebody that you haven't before, because you didn't meet Rick Hughes prior to this.
Right. Correct? Yeah. And again, a lot of what we're doing, it's I keep giving, David's probably going to say, dude, you got to stop with all the compliments, but I'm giving David a lot of kudos because he is the visionary behind all of this. He's kind of the puppet master. He's the one that's brought all of us together, from Andy to me to Rick, and the ideas of doing certain songs. And, you know, he's basically the ringleader that's making all of this happen. And because it's working is a testament to his vision. And so I'll just keep giving him so many kudos and so much credit for this, because this is, you know, without his tenacity, none of this would happen. You know, I got to the point where I'm so slammed. I'm literally like juggling 4 albums at the same time simultaneously. And I'm like, I get to the point where, dude, I need a month or 2, come back to me later. But I don't want to let David down because I love his drive. I love his work ethic. So I'm like, I'm going to find a way to sneak this in and make sure that everything fits in. And I got my end done, but it's not a rushed end. It was, everything just organically happens. And I love the enthusiasm that I get from he and Andy in terms of when I turn in something. And yeah, there might be little tweaks here and there, or I might hear something I want to change later, but for the most part, it's been such an organic process where I do something like, that's awesome, that's great, that's killer, and it inspires me, it drives me to want to do more, and I love how we kind of bounce off each other that way.
And so for this album, I know you mentioned earlier that, you know, there were some songs that were brought to you, Jeff, specifically, and the kind of started this collaboration. But where are we at right now in the recording process? Because, I mean, I know, like you just mentioned, I know, David, you're working on stuff as well. You know, you're working on other albums, you're working on other songs, and this is kind of a project that is, you know, out of, you know, passion and out of want to really do it. So I know that there's probably no kind of direct rush on getting it out immediately, but are you guys in the middle of recording, finishing writing? You know,
we're actually mixing 15 songs right now.
Oh, wow.
5 of them are done. Yeah.
Oh, so we're fast recording.
Oh yeah. And it's like Jeff said, you know, there's certain things that, you know, you sort of try to roll the rock up the hill, right? And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, you know, a thing happens where the synergy is so good and it just takes off and has a life of its own. And this is very much one of those. I had a whole other record I was working on, and, you know, and in addition, obviously Megadeth is hovering in the background, and that's working at its own tempo and pace and everything. But, you know, I had another record I was working on as well. And all of a sudden this thing just got wings and took off. And it's just like, you know, what life has taught me is, you know, our friend Al Petrelli, he always said, he goes, just say yes. You know, you might get overbooked, better to be overbooked than underbooked. So I do. That's what I followed his credo. And and just say yes to a lot of things. And I found it's, you know, rather than being black and white, you know, in the middle is where all the colors are. So it's a beautiful, colorful life, and it's more fun there, quite honestly. And this record that Jeff and I are doing, I mean, all of a sudden out of nowhere, it went from, you know, because we were originally going to actually pop out a little, an original track. And then we mixed two songs, an original track and Swords and Tequila. And all of a sudden we kind of went, wow, I don't know, this Swords and Tequila thing has got some pop to it. This has got a buzz. So we all agreed, yeah, let's do that one. So we pushed that out. And of course that lit up the airwaves. And, you know, all of a sudden, you know, a manager friend called and an agent said I'm in, and a record company's standing at the door, you go, you know what I mean? So all of a sudden it's one of those things you're like, wow, like we were just sitting here, you know, writing some music. So again, we essentially have, again, these 15 tracks we're mixing, a manager, an agent, and a label all ready to like standing. It's basically at the starting line, ready to go. And I think probably for us now, we're kind of going, wow, okay, where in our schedule do we put this? Because that's, you know, it's just some strategic stuff that you know, you figure out. But all of a sudden it's like you kind of make a way when you thought there was no other way, you know, and that is a beautiful thing, because we've all walked around the music business with our tin cup, you know, hat in hand, begging for a record deal or asking, please listen to my demos, you know. I don't care how famous you are, you know what I mean? When you're walking in the door with a new record, you're starting at square one. You're all over. It's, you know what I mean? And they may take your call and let you in the door because you've got a past, but at the end of the day, your new record lives and dies on its own. And I mean, I've sat in Madison, you know, Times Square in New York, at, you know, bigwig president offices, listening to records with people and just kind of, and in my own mind going, yeah, this isn't the one. I can tell in the room right now that this is not going to make the grade. You know what I mean? And that's a weird feeling. And we sit with our friends who are in A&R and, you know, and walking in my house, it sounds great. And I get in the office in Burbank at Warner Brothers and I'm listening to it and I'm just going, yep, this isn't the one. It's not going to go the cut, you know, and I've showcased things, as I'm sure Jeff has. And, you know, people were gracious enough to let you in the door to give you some time, but everything lives and dies on its own merit, you know? So the fact that Jeff and I have some songs here that are just stirring the pot and waking people up and getting people excited is a wonderful thing. And that is, again, you know, lead me where you need me kind of thing. You know what I mean? It's like just kind of following those instincts. And, you know, Jeff, thank you for your compliments. But again, it kind of comes from a divine inspiration. You know what I mean? It really is. It's just sort of like when the inspiration hits and you go. And, you know, Jeff even said a couple weeks ago, Sydney, he goes, listen, my calendar's cleared. I've got a couple weeks, sure, I can do it. And I mean, man, we really pressed the flesh, man. I mean, Jeff was grinding every day, putting new tracks back. I was writing lyrics. Like, oh my God, we got a song. We freaking need some lyrics. Oh my God. You know, but what was fun about it is through the process, we found what we were all good at. You know what I mean? It's like, we kind of knew, like, man, if we throw this to Jeff, he's going to knock this out of the park. You know, all of a sudden, just like, hey, don't sweat it. I got this one. I totally got the idea. It's in my head. You know, I'm sitting down to dinner, and next thing you know, there's a freaking, you know, a track from Jeff. And I'm like, hold dinner. I got to listen to this track. You know what I mean? And then all of a sudden we're wound up into another couple hours of, oh my God, this is great. So, you know, it's just fun to feel that excitement. That's that same excitement we had when we were teenagers and we were in our first band. Yeah. We were all trying to be Kiss or Aerosmith or whoever our heroes, going, man, I want to be like them. And you know, let's jam and let's learn some songs. It's that same feeling. And I think, you know, that's ultimately what we're always going for. You know, it's, you know, you see behind us platinum records, and those are all great and everything, but that's a byproduct of that feeling that we just long to have. And when you capture it and it lands in your life, you're like going, oh my God, this is awesome. And you kind of put other things to the side to follow. It's kind of like falling in love. You never expect it to happen, and one day it walks in the door and you're like, wow, okay. You know, you start rearranging your schedule around having the date, you know what I mean? And music is no different.
The crazy thing is we were just doing, you know, one song at a time with no real time frame or anything. And I couldn't believe it. At one point, David said, yeah, so I was kind of going over the songs. We have this, and we counted 15 songs. And It's like, where did that happen? But normally when you're working on an album, you basically say, okay, we need 11, 12 songs. And you kind of just say, we'll do this kind of vibe, this what you sequentially put the idea of an album together, whether there's a theme behind it or whether you need this amount of heavy stuff, this amount of mid-tempo stuff. With us, we were just churning them out and not even counting, there was no real purpose behind it. But after we stepped back, how do we have 15 songs already? When did that happen? And it was like an accidental, I don't even know how to put it. It was just one of these accidental purpose type of things.
It's like a rock and roll baker's dozen, like, whoa,
exactly.
Where did this?
Yeah. And it's so cool to have that without, again, there was no real intent or rhyme or reason behind it. We were just doing it. And then all of a sudden we have more than enough to actually put an album out.
Yeah, like I said, it's you guys now have the freedom to, you're not trying to make music to impress a label. You're not trying to appease, this is the sophomore record after, you know what I mean? Like you guys have the ability to, have an album come out of wanting to just make an album, you know what I mean? Yeah. Which again, I go back to must be really, you guys have both experienced it with both, many projects that you've been a part of the pressure of we have to make an album and, there's not a lot, here, I don't really feel like making this album, but there's a lot of pressure riding on this because I've heard it, you know what I mean? And it must be nice to be able to, have a project that is solely because you really want to do it. And you want to push other things aside so you can, work on it. It must be nice.
Yeah, we've made a couple of those records. It's like you're tired. You just came off the 18-month tour. It's like, let's get right back in the studio, open up the new fund. And it's like, what are we doing here? We don't have any songs or they're not done. We're tired. Fuck, it's Christmas. Shouldn't we be at home? Why are we doing this right? You know what I mean? And, we have. And sometimes there's schedule things. It's like, listen, we've got these tour dates coming up in May. We got to get this record done. January, we got to start. And you're like, oh, I just needed some time to just chill, And it's funny, this whole when did we start this, Jeff? Like, I think the end of January, right? Wasn't it like on the?
Yeah, it was. January, it was pretty. As far as the bulk of material came, it's literally months.
It's been about 2 months.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And the idea behind it was we were kind of like just kind of throwing a few things to each other and getting some things done, and I got to be honest with you. When David came to me, he goes, listen, I got another song. I can throw you a few bucks. And I said, you know what? You save the money. Let's just do the songs and we'll decide where it's going to go later. If you pitch it to another band or if you end up releasing it on an album, we can deal with the financial end later. Let's just create and see what we do with the actual material itself. And I'm glad I did that because from that, David was able to kind of process the idea that I just want to keep pumping out songs and see where it goes, as opposed to, well, this is starting to get pricey. If I have to keep hiring Jeff to sing on this stuff, it's going to seem more like a session for him, and it's just going to become kind of like a music library for me. But by not taking or putting any financial side wall between us, it turned into a creative side that it made me get into it a lot more than just, okay, I'm getting paid, I got to get this knocked out and get it out of the way. And I have many a session where I put 100% into anything, whether I'm getting paid or I hate it or whatever. I do it anyways. But for this, there was something like a different intent behind it, by the fact that there was no real money or financial gain between it. It was like, I want to make David stoked. I want to make Andy stoked at what we're creating here. So it's not that business side or business arrangement side to kind of fuck with it, Yeah.
And I'm curious too, really quick, just about the overall sound of this record, which I know can sometimes be a little ambiguous, but I know that you guys both obviously have ties in hard rock and metal, so it's going to be focused, of course, towards that. But, how would you guys kind of describe what the vibe of this record is?
Well, I think there's an initial thing when people hear our two names. There's going to be an affiliation back to Megadeth and Rising Force for sure, right? Because that's, from whence we came. You know what I mean? And the die has been cast, and and that's a good thing. It's a beautiful thing. So I think you will absolutely hear, oh my God, this is exactly what I was hoping. Now, of course, with that, we've got all of Rainbow to Judas Priest to Deep Purple to, you know, in between, you know, that have come along, and those things kind of make their way into our, you know, into our music as well. But at the same time, you know, Jeff just alluded to, you know, when we make these records, we kind of go, okay, we need some heavy, some fast, some mid-tempo, some slow. Should we have a ballad? You know what I mean? You kind of go about that. Yeah. We did not engineer this record on the outset of like, here's the 11 slots. We need to write these songs. Yeah. We just wrote. Let's just write and see where it goes. And while we're mixing now, we're sitting back and sizing it up, and it's just very nicely laying itself right out into a flow of an album. You know, when you think about an album, it's like a family photo album. You don't just put only the pictures of Disneyland. You know, you take the camping trip, the fishing trip. Oh, there's Junior's birthday, and oh yeah, we went to Disney. You know, it's sort of an all-inclusive album of your life of photos, and a record album is the same way. You know, songs are a story. So you want to put the story to tell kind of a bigger story, a sort of a narrative. And that's always the trick when you're putting an album together, an LP, a long play, is to take these little short vignettes and have them all make sense on their own and hopefully be part of a bigger narrative. And you know, again, Jeff and I grew up in that era of long play albums, just like looks like hundreds you have behind you by your stereo. Yeah. You know, that's the world we grew up in. You know, obviously today, younger artists, obviously still make LPs, but it's, you know, it's a very singles oriented thing, which is fine. But you know, when we're, you know, our music and our fans, I think we like that. There's that thing about you bring home the CD or now the vinyl and you slice it open and you open it and it smells the ink and the smell of the vinyl, and you read the credits and the lines. And I think even when we're writing the lyrics, it's like we're already starting to frame, you know, what the lyrics are going to look like when we press them in the vinyl and, you know, into the CD package. And, you know, it's an experience. You know, to me, it's like when I go to the Apple store, you're not just buying a phone. It's like this experience. They got the store and the people and the customer service. It's like this the box looks cool. It's like opening it. It's like the Monty Python with the Holy Grail. You know, and, you know, that to me is what music is. It's this experience, you know, it's like it draws you into that world. So when you're either sitting at home or in your car, it takes you to a whole other place. You know, to me, that was the beauty of music as a kid, is it took me out of high school. It took me out of the doldrum. I grew up working on my father's farm. It took me away from the doldrum of these things, and it took me off to this fantasy land. And I think music, you know, I love that when I sit back and I listen to these mixes, it takes me there. I don't want to be half in the middle of something. To me, I hate being in the car talking and listening to music. Like my dad would always do that. I'd get in the car with my dad. He'd turn the music off because he wanted to talk. I'd get in the car with my mom, who was a musician. We wouldn't talk. We'd just turn the radio up and listen, you know? And I'm the same way. I don't want to, Jeff sends a mix and it's like, well, I'm going to be working on the computer. Fuck that. Put all that crap aside, man. I want to go way down and just lose myself in the music. And I think the fun that we're the guys creating that stuff is just so awesome. You know, it's just like, this is like a dream come true. It's like, I can't believe we get to do this and we still get to do this.
You see, Sydney, you see why it's so easy to work with this guy? You just, everything he says is like, I agree. That's me. Yeah. It's kismet.
Yeah. I totally agree about like just the physical copy thing. And I've had this conversation with many people who have come on the podcast because I'm just I'm an avid, like just physical copy person, as you can see. And, you know, it's one of those things that a lot of, I feel like people specifically in my generation, which, I mean, if you want to listen to music however you want to, but, you know, it's kind of like you said, it's an experience sitting down and listening to the entire side of a record. You know, when you're listening to a record, I mean, you can drop the needle down on the song you want to hear, but you can never start at the beginning, and it's, you know, it's whatever. And, you know, to be able to sit down and listen and have to flip the record, and, you know, it's an immersive thing that I feel like, you know, nowadays when you can just pop on, you know, one
playlist,
song on Spotify, and then, you know, it's playing on your Bluetooth speaker and you're doing a million other things, you know, it's, you're not fully, I don't think, appreciating, you know, the output. So I totally agree with that whole concept. And
you just said a word that I haven't heard in a long time, aside. right? A side. I mean, it's like when you listen to vinyl, it's a side. You know, like it's funny. I was just downloading some ironically some Judas Priest records that I'm not that familiar with, Retribution and Angel Retribution, whatever that's how not familiar I am with them. Some stuff from the 2000s. I thought, I should get familiar with these records. I'm just a Priest fan from the old days. And it's funny, I was looking at, again, there's 15 songs plus 3 more bonus. And I'm kind of looking at it overwhelmed, like, how am I going to digest this? And it's just how iTunes, I buy all my stuff in iTunes. I pay for an Apple, Apple radio thing, because I pay to buy music. I don't get expected for free. It's how my bills have been paid. So I support my friends, but when I was buying it, I was like, oh my God, it's like almost overwhelming to digest 15 songs. So when you say a side, it's like, I remember when we were making the first Megadeth records, me and Dave would go into the mastering lab with the mastering guy, because they would actually cut the vinyl lacquer, right?
Right.
And, we only had 8 songs. Like when we would go and make a Megadeth record, like Peace Sells and So Far So Good, So What, all those records in the 80s. And I was kind of like going, God, this, first of all, we're recording every song we have, period. So that there is no other option. It's not like we wrote 20, we wrote 8. This is what you get. And so this is what you get. But I remember the mastering guy going, I love how you guys make records, because, you're leaving, because the more songs you put on it, the closer the grooves get together, and you start to lose low end is the first thing to go. So the mastering guy was like, man, your records, I'm really able to cut the nice wide groove, which gives a nice warm bottom end to the recording. So I was like, well, there's the good news about only having 8 songs when we go and record the Peace Sells album. But,
and you should have gone with, we meant to do that.
Yeah, we meant to do that, exactly. Yeah, especially in this day and age when you have to deliver 11, 12 songs or even 15. Oh. I remember cutting a record, it was for Roadrunner. I think it was like the 13 record or something, and they wanted like 15 songs. I'm like, are we only getting paid for 11 here? Why are we giving you 15? You know what I mean? And it's this thing where, labels just wanted content.
Yeah.
Because again, I get it. You need one for Walmart, one for Target. You need an extra one for Japan. We know the game. We know what it is. But at the same time, it's important for us that we give our best, because at the end of the day, our names and our faces are on these records forever. The people at the record company have come and gone. Hell, the record company may not even be around anymore, but, our faces as the artists and the creators, we're there forever, and they hold us accountable, whether it's good, bad, or otherwise. And we've gotten our praises sung. We've also taken the bullets and the hits for the records that maybe weren't so good,
Yeah. It's, and, too thing about like having like the different sides of the records, and then you got like a double album, and when you got like a double album, it was like the coolest thing, right? Because it was like now you had 4 sides music.
4 sides, yeah, exactly.
It's a 4 sides
and
music.
the fold out,
and the gatefold, and the inserts, and
and sometimes a poster.
The poster, right? Like I think of Alice Cooper is like my favorite. I know you have a connection with him, David. But he has School's Out and $1 Billion Babies with the big bill, and even that interactive stuff I miss so much, because it feel like it's such just a part of
well,
it.
The imaging is really important. In fact, we were just having that conversation yesterday about imaging and stuff, because it is more than just buying the music. It's a lifestyle.
It's a brand,
when people wear the T-shirt, this is Doyle's T-shirt for his this is for him, you know what I mean? It's his energy drink, but it's him. And when you wear the shirt, you're essentially, you're when you walk in a room, like you go to the bank or whatever, and you see some dude over there with his Slayer shirt. Well, I don't know if the Slayer guy goes to the bank or not. Maybe he does, but it's but whatever it is, he's got his Iron Maiden shirt on, and there's some metalhead over there, and and you can tell, you know what I mean? The guy that wears the polo golf shirt, he's a tribe, the guy that wears the Iron Maiden Megadeth shirt, he's a tribe, and so that's you can, that's how we are. We sort of differentiate each other from that. And so, that all that imaging is important. I bought a lot of records just from the album cover, Van Halen 1, AC/DC, If You Want Blood, Judas Priest, Unleashed in the East. I mean, I became lifelong fans of these bands just because of that one album I saw sitting in the.
Did you buy Riot's album because of the album cover, or?
No, you know what? I did not. I was like, there's kind of a cute, cuddly little critter on the front here, but it was like, is that a snow seal? What is that thing? But no, it's funny. That one, it's funny how that one came into my life was through, this Castle Donington record, Monsters of Rock, before, now they call it the Download Festival. But years ago it was called Monsters of Rock. It was a concert brand, and it was held at Castle Donington. I remember the drummer in my band, we were like 15. He walks in the door and goes, dude, check out this live album. It's this festival in England. And that was a whole new concept to us here in America, because we didn't, I guess we had Iowa Jam and California Jam and Texas Jam. We had, I guess, kind of festival brands here, but it was like when stuff happened in Europe, it was like over there. It was bigger. It just felt more monumental. And so I remember Riot was on there. It was a different song that they had on the record, but that's how I came to know Riot. And right after that, getting to know them. And I always said they're kind of like the USA's representation during the new wave of British heavy metal, because the new wave of British heavy metal, again, because it came from England, it felt so much bigger, and it's, there's a funny story. I worked for Hartley Peavy, right, for a few years, ran his artist relations. And he took great pride in being from the South, Mississippi, the deep South. And he would always, when he would do these talks to his company, he'd say, God damn it, rock and roll is formed here in my backyard. The Crossroads, right? It was right there in Mississippi, But we gave it away to the English, and they sold it back to us in the form of the British invasion, So he always had his kind of like, damn it, it was formed right here in my backyard, And I was thinking about that, and it's true with us Americans. It's like, when it comes from overseas, it has this extra, wow, it's, this extra thing. I think heavy metal, Jeff got to sing with one of the pioneers with Yngwie, I remember. When Mike Varney brought him over, and that's right when I first moved to LA. I met Dave in '83, and I remember Yngwie, and then Rising Force record came out. As like, this stuff was like the holy grail of the next level of virtuoso guitar playing. Hollywood was filled with guys trying to sound like Eddie Van Halen, Steve Lukather, and Yngwie. And Jeff, like you talked about, he got to be part of that mold of that sound, as a singer, where the hell do you sing in this? There's a lot of notes going on. Where do you sing in and around this? And Megadeth's very similar. There's a lot of notes and a lot of riffs, and where do you put a melody in that? So I always had great respect for Jeff, being part of that and having an identifiable sound. And I think, look, whether you're Kenny G, you're Jeff Scott Soto, you're Ellefson, you're whoever, Yngwie, whatever, to have a sound that you're known for is an incredibly wonderful thing to have, because it's ultimately your passport to everything. People hire you to sound like that guy. Sometimes they hire us to just be generic and just do our job and, sing or play the part. But it's a beautiful thing when people know you for a piece of work, that's so iconic and held in such high regard. That just becomes, it's attached to your name forever. Yeah. And it's a beautiful thing that we both have that.
Yeah. Like the first thing I think of when you said that was like automatically like Eddie Van Halen. Like, I don't need to hear, I don't need you to tell me, that's, Eddie Van Halen. Like, you hear a note and you're like, that's Eddie, and
right.
To have that is incredible. He went, even like Alex Van Halen, I can hear his drumming and be like, yep, that's Alex Van Halen. It's incredible to have. And like you said, you carry that with you in every single project.
Funny you mention that about drummers, right? Because there's only a few guys, Kenny Aronoff, Alex Van Halen. Like when you hear that snare drum, you only have to hear like one measure of it and you go, yeah, that's Alex Van Halen. Or like, oh, that's Aronoff, just that crack to the snare. Because drummers are a difficult thing because of how you record drums, and it's you can make drums sound so different, but the personality, it's funny, they get signature snare drums, we get signature basses and guitars, but it's like they get signature snare drums because that really that is how they hit that drum, which is the drum that's probably that and the kick drummer probably hit the most out of a kit, but it's like, it's funny you mention that because Alex is one of the most notorious sounding drummers, largely from that snare drum,
Yeah.
of on those recordings that we grew up with Van Halen. It's part of the sound just as much as Eddie is.
I remember even doing the very first Yngwie album. And then eventually, like 2 months later, we did Marching Out. I mean, I joined Yngwie, and the weekend I was confirmed in his band, I was in the studio to do the only 2 vocal songs on that first album. But because that was already a work in progress way before I joined the band, they were already working on, and Yngwie was already writing stuff that would eventually become Marching Out. So we were already diving into that while we were mixing the first album. And so not even 2 months later, I'm singing the vocals on the Marching Out album. And I remember going, oh my God, I don't have an identifiable sound. I don't have, as soon as you hear one note from Steve Perry or Freddie Mercury, you know immediately that's them. And I feel, where am I going to find that voice that sounds like me? When you hear me, that one note or that one line, you know it's Jeff Scott Soto. And so all I was trying to do back then was choose my 2 favorite singers in metal at that time, which were Dio and Bruce Dickinson. I tried to combine what they did, and I was kind of impersonating them in what I was doing on Marching Out album, because I didn't feel I had a voice. And like, if I just sing the way I sing, it'll probably sound like, a cross between the Bee Gees and Bobby Kimball from Toto, because I have a very soulful pop background. So I needed to emulate metal guys to actually get that identifiable metal voice. Yeah. And that's all I was doing on that. And so from that, I was starting to kind of form my own thing based on impersonating 2 other guys. And then I eventually found my niche of my kind of blueprint, or my thumbprint rather, of where my voice lies. But it's so funny because every time we talk about, finding that identifiable sound or voice or whatever, I just remember that time so well. Like, even though it was 37 years ago, whatever it was, I just remember, oh my God, nobody's going to like me because I don't have an identifiable sound. And then obviously decades later, it's like, oh, as soon as I can hear Jeff Scott Soto singing background on something because he's got such an identifiable sound.
Yeah. I feel like that's how it is though with a lot of different bands. You see like a band's like, or even if you want to look at individual like instrumentalists or musicians or just bands, you look at a band's first album and you can really kind of pinpoint their influences and just artists that they sound similar to. And by the second album, you can kind of see them. Yeah. Okay, like you can still pick out those influences, but like they are starting to get their own thing. And then by the third album, they're like, yeah, like this is
honed. Yeah,
this is us.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that you say that, because it's like, I feel like it's definitely something that when you see an artist starting out, you can kind of see that evolution of finding their own sound. So, and
it's harkening back to something David said earlier in terms of where we cut our cloth, where we cut our teeth was Megadeth and Yngwie, and people will want to hear that influence. If they just want to naturally hear that we're actually identifying with that sound. And so I find myself going back to that style of singing on some things. I find myself kind of grasping that, where maybe I haven't used it in a while. I haven't really tried to sing that way or tried to even utilize that. I'm finding myself going, that vibe will work for this. And yeah, it's a more mature and, I guess, experienced version of that. Yeah. But it's cool to draw from that, because I do want people that originally found my voice and visually found my side of what they like about my voice to actually say, oh my God, I missed him singing that way. And it's the same thing with David. I'm sure people are going to expect to hear his kind of signature sound and what we're doing. Whether we're not trying to do a Megadeth or Yngwie clash, but naturally they're going to say, if that's missing from there, they're going to go, well, that could just be any other bass player. They're going to want to know that that's David playing on the bass. Billy Sheehan's another bass player. You as soon as you hear it, that's Billy because of his sound and his identity, his signature is on there. And it's a beautiful thing when you finally have that to draw from, but then you can actually utilize it in some other things.
Yeah, naturally that also just comes out, I mean, you've been working so long singing a certain way and playing a certain way that eventually it's just you. You don't even have to try to, right. I have to sound like David Ellefson, or I have to sound like, Jeff Scott Soto. It's just you. It's just how you write. It's just how you sing, you record, etc.
Yeah. And through the years,
sign your name.
Yeah, right.
Through the years, you try to expand on that. You try to challenge yourself to do and add more to your arsenal. So that way, if something like this comes along, you can add that side that you normally already didn't do, or that you got from somewhere else. And that's what TSO is another one that's really, I channeled different areas that I normally wouldn't have in my arsenal, but I got from TSO. So now I'm like, oh, I can use this kind of dramatic side to put into this. And there's a song that we have together that David put in parentheses in the lyric. He said, this will be like if a preacher or if a street preacher or something like that would be in this part. So instead of just singing the part, I recorded it with kind of a different way of singing, and then I put some kind of weird megaphone distortion effect on it, and you hear the story come out on those lines, as opposed to me just singing it like I'm singing the rest of the song.
Yeah, it's so cool to hear. I'm really looking forward to hearing this record, because as soon, like I said when we started this, as soon as I saw this collaboration and I heard the first song, I was like, oh, I'm really looking forward to this, because it was unexpected in the best way. But I, kind of like we talked about, that's been the kind of the pro of this weird time is, to have the unexpected kind of, bring unexpected things. Perfect. Thank you guys so much. I know we stayed on here for quite a bit, but it was such a pleasure getting to finally meet you, David, and to have you on, Jeff. So thank you guys.
We like to talk.
Yes, we do. You have never a loss for words around here.
Well, I really, really, really appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to hearing the record, and have a fantastic rest of your day, you guys.
Thank you, Sid.
Thanks so much. See ya.
Of course. See ya.